Hi folks, this is Jason Moore here with MTGOacademy.com, and we're looking at a rug affinity deck I talked about in a previous article, and I'm of course writing about in this current article. Now let's do a deck tech of this video, break down what the deck's doing and how it operates. As a rug affinity deck, that means that we're playing the colors red, blue, and green. So we're only playing 3 colors as opposed to the full 4 colors that you're going to see in the majority of affinity lists. And the reason I'm doing this is because for me, I found that this has made the deck a little bit more consistent in terms of opening hands. There's a lot less hands that we're forced to mulligan. And so we have better starts overall, at least in my opinion. Now there has been some debate over whether or not this is actually a factor as enough of a benefit over the 4 color lists, and I'm not 100% certain that it is, but I think it's worth testing out so we can try and get some more information and more results with it. Another thing is that I'm playing a couple more lands than usual. You typically are going to see 18 lands. We've even seen decks kind of skew towards 17 or 16 lands in the daily event results. But I found for me personally, 19 has been just enough that when I see an opening 7, I'm going to be more likely to have that 2 or 3 lands that I need to really get the game started. So the land base is completely comprised of artifact lands. This is an artifact centric deck, and the way that it's really going to be powerful is because we're going to have a high enough artifact count to cast spells for cheap and to get some of our creatures and our burn spells to do more damage. So starting with 4 copies of Darksteel Citadel, this produces colorless mana, which is somewhat of a downside. However, this is an indestructible land that adds to our artifact count. So it's not going to be that bad, especially when we have colorless spells to cast and we have colorless artifacts that actually fix our colors for us. And then following that up, we've got a full set of the green artifact land Tree of Tales, the red Great Furnace, which is the red producing artifact land. We've got 3 copies of Vault of Whispers, which we actually don't use in this deck for the black mana. If you see a typical affinity deck playing Vault of Whispers, it's usually because they're running Disciple of the Vault in their main deck, and they could be running things like Duress and Doomblade in their sideboard. But we're just using this as an artifact land to add to our artifact count. And then we've got 4 copies of Seat of the Synod, which is the blue producing artifact land here. Now let's take a look at our turn 1 accelerant. Well, not accelerants. The only accelerant in the deck is Springleaf Drum. Our turn 1 color fixers. And my color fixers are all at the 1 converted mana cost. And my numbers are a little different than you'll probably find elsewhere. So we're playing 1 copy of Chromatic Sphere. This is almost identical to Chromatic Star. The only difference is that it's going to only draw us a card when we sacrifice it with its activated ability to add mana to our pool. So if we sacrifice this to a Tog or a Krark Clan Shaman, it's not going to draw us a card. So it's a little worse than Chromatic Star overall, but it's acting in this deck as the 5th copy of Chromatic Star. I'm playing this over things like Prophetic Prism, which, while that does have a permanent lasting life on the board, it does not cost 1, which really helps with our curve and helping us get fast starts. It's that we have 11 turn 1 artifacts to really help us get going. Now we've got the 4 copies of Chromatic Star, a one-time color fixing effect. It's going to draw us a card, so it replaces itself, and also, as opposed to the Sphere, when you do sack this to a Shaman or an Atog, you're going to draw a card off of it, which is pretty nice. I'm running 3 copies of Springleaf Drum. Now, you're normally going to see 4 copies in almost every affinity deck, but for me, I've found that this is a really, really bad top deck late in the game, and 3 seems to be the correct number for for me as an Affinity player. So you're going to see this in many games, but multiples is less likely. You can still find this in an opening hand and get off to a really good start. And what this does is it's a color fixer that stays on the board. So our smaller creatures or our earlier creatures actually accelerate into other things. You'll often have a Frogmite draw that you can use this with, or even an early Carapace Forger or a Tog can tap into, additional creatures. And then 3 copies of Terrarion. This is also being played over Prophetic Prism and some of the other options. It does enter the battlefield tapped, so you can't use its ability right away, but it allows you to add 2 colors to your pool and also draws a card if you sack it to the Shaman or a Tog. And I really like having these 11 1-drop colorless artifacts. The nice thing about, or the thing to keep in mind about Terrarion is that when you do add these 2 colors of mana, you're going to be drawing a card. So what you want to do is, if you have a spell you're wanting to cast, obviously add that color to your pool, and then look at your board, look at what lands are in play, and you want to add a color that you're currently unable to cast using just your lands. That way, if you draw a card, let's say you have no Great Furnace on the board, so you want to cast a Thought Cast or something like that, you're gonna probably want to add blue-red, so that if you draw a Tog or a Galvblast, you have the option of casting those as well. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that clearly enough, but with Terrarion, you just kind of have to think about the colors you're adding and what combination you really want. 4 copies of Galvanic Blast. This is an incredible burn spell. In this deck, Metalcraft is almost always active. So you have what is essentially just better than a Lightning Bolt. You've got 4 damage at instant speed that can go to any creature or player that's targetable. So this is huge. I mean, typically in like an Izzet Cloudpost deck, you'll see a card like Flame Slash, which is much less versatile. It's, that's sorcery speed, only going to hit a creature, and 4 toughness is just a magic number in Pauper. In Affinity decks, of course, you have the Forgers and the Enforcers, you have Spire Golems and Delver, you have the Nettle Sentinels and Pit Skulks that can't survive a blast with Gather Courage. So you have you have Mnemonic Wall in the Cloudpost decks. You have a lot of relevant targets that this is just going to bury for the cost of red, and also dealing 4 to the face for a single mana is really powerful. This gives us a lot of reach in addition to some of our other win conditions like Fling and a Tog. So before we get into the creatures here, I just want to explain that this deck is often considered an aggro combo deck. I personally consider it more of a mid-range combo deck because against the controlling strategies, we tend to take more of an aggressive role, and against the faster, smaller creature aggressive decks, we tend to be the control during the early turns. We don't have any 1-drop creatures to attack early, and not all of our starts are going to be turn 2 explosive aggro starts. Sometimes this deck doesn't really fill the board till turn 3. So I don't necessarily consider this a straight up aggro deck. It does have some fast openers that can be aggressive, but it's not always going to fill that same role in a traditional aggressive sense. But it basically is going to win the game through large creatures, affinity creatures, and burn to the face, or it has the combo win of a Tog plus Fling. And in the 4-color versions, playing black, it also includes Disciple of the Vault into that combination. So what you have here is a deck that is formidable in the mid game, but also really devastating in the late game. You can actually combo off between a Tog and Fling, which I'll explain in just a moment, and take people out from 20 life even. So it's very absurd, very powerful deck, and that's why we're playing it. I really like this deck actually. So starting off with our 2-drops, we have Carapace Forger. Now this is normally just a Grizzly Bear, but with our deck this will be active by turn 3, if not turn 2. You get a 4/4 creature for 2 mana, so it's very aggressively costed, and it outclasses a number of creatures in the format. This is a card you're probably going to see, along with Galvanic Blast, in all of the Affinity lists, regardless of whether they're playing black, white, 4 colors, what have you. A Tog is one of the signature creatures here, and as you can see, it's a creature that can get very big very quickly. It's the largest creature in the format. You sacrifice an artifact, give it +2/+2 until end of turn. So what you have here is a creature that needs to be blocked almost every single turn in those mid and late game stages because we have so many artifacts on the board. If this is allowed to connect, we're able to make a lethal attack in a number of situations. And when paired with the card Fling, which we should just take a look at right now, you can actually sacrifice the Atog, target your opponent with the Fling, and you can deal a lethal amount of damage. Now, Fling is kind of a sketchy card because in order to cast it, you also have to sack a creature. So it's requiring you to potentially 2-for-1 yourself. But the advantages, I think, are worthwhile. We're playing 2 copies here. You want to draw this in the later game. It's arguable if you want to play 1 or 2. Right now we're playing 2. That's seems to be the consensus. You do see lists that play 1, but 2 is a lot more common. And essentially you really want to use this with a Tog to go to the face. You can use it for other means, but I think that's the best application of the card. 4 copies of Frogmite. This is a 2/2 creature at the earliest, or ideally you want to play it on turn 2. Sometimes it'll cost 2 mana, sometimes it'll cost 1, sometimes it'll cost 0. And so it's a free grizzly bear, so to speak, and it also is going to up our artifact count. Not a great combatant, but sometimes can get in for damage and can be used for other means, such as accelerating with the Springleaf Drum, getting our Affinity count higher, being sacked to an Atog, or just swinging with the rest of the team and being the guy that gets blocked or the guy that gets through, depending on what the game state looks like. Thoughtcast, another powerful card in this deck. With Affinity for artifacts, you're getting draw 2 cards that cost less than Divination. This almost always costs blue. Sometimes you have to cast 2 mana, but draw 2 for 2 mana is still really good. And drawing 2 for 1 mana is unprecedented. So this card is extremely strong, playing 4 copies. Really helps us find what we need to find in a given game and outplay some of the other decks that just don't have access to effects like this. One of the unique things about my deck is I'm playing 4 copies of Somber Hoverguard. This is just a way to fill out our creature count. We're only playing 20 creatures, which isn't a huge amount. It's a serviceable number of creatures, but this one's nice because it really is undercosted. You're getting a 3/2 flyer for blue usually, and what you do with this deck is you really create an overwhelming board presence. You get multiple 4/4s, you get a Tog on the board, and you get Hoverguards in the air, and you just are able to win in maybe 2 or 3 turns worth of swinging for damage, and the opponent has very little time to find answers and deal with things. So this is not the best creature in the deck, and it may be the worst creature in the deck, but it's going to fill a role and do it well enough that I think it's worth keeping in the deck. A lot of people would disagree with playing 4, and you're not going to really see 4 Hoverguards in other lists. But because we're rug colors, this is one of the creatures I think that needs to be considered in terms of filling out those creature slots. Lastly, we have Mirror Enforcer. Similar to Carapace Forger, this is going to be an undercosted 4/4. Sometimes you can get this down for 0 mana, and this is a card that's going to probably come online. I would say turn 4 is about the average, but turn 3 you can get these down, and depending on how many artifacts you have, you can play out multiple copies of this in a single turn. And those are the kind of draws that are really going to just roll people over, steamroll them. So this deck, I mean, the strengths of the deck, it can be very explosive. You can get multiple 4/4s on the board early on and take the opponent out in a couple swings. You have these undercosted spells. You have 4/4s for cheap. You have divinations for cheap, and you have galvanic blast, which is just unheard of. The instant speed 4 damage that commonly happens. I mean, that is the norm for that card. On top of all that, and the artifacts that cycle, so we see a lot of our deck. We have the Fling a Tog combo finish, which can knock people out from double-digit life totals. So we have a deck that can be devastating in the early game, downright unfair in the late game. So it's a well-rounded creature deck that is a little weak to artifact hate cards like Gorilla Shaman and 2-for-1s like Ancient Grudge and Gleeful Sabotage. Those are really what are going to hit the weaknesses of this deck. It's also a little weak to black removal, because black removal is more about destroying creatures and removing them rather than caring about their toughness. The high toughness doesn't benefit against Doomblade type effects. So that's the main deck. Let's take a look at the sideboard. We've got a kind of a not as well-rounded of a sideboard right now. I'm trying to get the numbers right and figure out what cards we want to play, but I think it's going to be decent for the matches coming up. 3 copies of Ancient Grudge we want to use mostly for the mirror match. It's going to help get us some value. It's in our colors, just providing us with 2-for-1s. Hopefully will help us get an edge against the Mirror Enforcers and Frogmites staring us down on the other side of the table. Also 3 copies of Hydroblast. This can also be used in the mirror to take out Atogs, to counter Galvanic Blasts and Flings. It's going to work well against Goblins decks and Burn decks also, and perhaps even Is It Cloudpost. I think we probably will leave this in the board against that deck though. Krark-Clan Shaman is going to be against creature decks like Stompy and Goblins that have a lot of ground pounders, and what we can do is sack some of our value artifacts to sweep the board completely and really get us ahead on cards and help us stabilize our life total and stabilize the board. So this to me is more of a controlling card, which we're going to bring in when we're playing more of a controlling role. Pyroblast, really great sideboard card coming in against Delver. You can bring it in against variations of Cloudpost as well. This is flexible because it hits permanents and counter spells for such a cheap cost. So this is a really nice one. Against blue decks, I like to take out Fling a lot of the times because Fling can be countered and that will really set us back. Whereas this can be pretty devastating in its own right. 3 copies of Raise. You want to be able to hit Cloudpost decks, hit the card Cloudpost, any type of Esper Temporal Fissure deck that's really relying on their bounce lands. This may set us back as well, but it's got a cheap cost in terms of mana, which I like. So I think this is the Stone Rain of choice for us. Single copy of Serene Heart. There's not really a ton of enchantment decks or hexproof decks, I guess I should say, in the format. So we only have a single copy, but it's a nice thing to have in here. I haven't played that matchup, so it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But this is a nice little trump that we can bring in for that. It might be a little too narrow, and we may want to fill the sideboard with something else. But that's what I'm running with for today. So this is our Rug Affinity deck. I hope you guys like the looks of it. It's a very cool looking deck, and it tends to play pretty well. I hope I have it consistent enough to show you guys some good matchups. And please let me know what you think of the deck. I hope you enjoy the matches coming up. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you guys later.